You know, for decades, the way we've tackled mental illness has been all about the symptoms. But what if we've been getting it all backward? There's this radical new framework from neuroscientist Abraham Peled that suggests a completely new roadmap for the brain, one that could absolutely change how we understand and treat mental health forever.
Okay, so get this. We're now at a point where we have technology that can literally talk to our brain's electrical circuits. This whole field is called neuromodulation, and it's built on this really powerful idea. What if we can physically zap or reset brain circuits that have gone haywire?
And I mean, these tools are really powerful. We're talking everything from non-invasive caps that send gentle currents through the skull, all the way to deeper methods like deep brain stimulation. And all of these are showing incredible promise for stuff like depression and schizophrenia. But, and this is a big but, there's this massive problem that's holding the entire field back.
And this quote from Dr. Peled really hits the nail on the head. See, we've got these incredible tools. That's our cart. But we're just winging it. We're using them without really knowing what's causing the illness in the first place. That cause, the etiology, that's the horse. And it's supposed to be leading the way, right?
So it's pretty simple, really. If we want to make these amazing tools actually work, we can't just aim them in the dark. We first need a solid brain-based theory of the cause, the etiology. We have to know exactly what piece of machinery in the brain is broken so we know what we're trying to fix.
Okay, so the big question is, how do we find this horse? Well, this new theory has an answer, and it all boils down to one of the brain's most amazing fundamental properties.
And that property is brain plasticity. The brain's incredible, lifelong ability to rewire itself. It's how we learn, it's how we adapt. This new way of thinking says that mental illness isn't some vague, abstract problem. No, it's a physical breakdown of this exact process.
Okay, here's the absolute core of the idea, and it's so elegant. What if all these different mental disorders are actually just breakdowns in brain plasticity, but happening at different speeds? The key isn't that the rewiring fails, it's how fast it fails.
So the theory lays out these 4 key timescales. You've got fast plasticity, happening in milliseconds, which governs our consciousness and perception. Then there's reactive plasticity, working over minutes to hours, helping us stabilize under stress. Over weeks to months, you have adaptive plasticity, which regulates our learning, memory, and mood. And finally, developmental plasticity, which shapes our entire personality across our whole lifetime.
And once you have those timescales, you can build this incredible map. It links specific disorders directly to them. Psychosis? That's a breakdown in that super fast millisecond plasticity. Anxiety? A failure in our ability to react to stress. Depression? That's a breakdown in our ability to adapt over weeks. And personality disorders? That's a problem with the deep, lifelong wiring of our brain.
All right, let's put this model to the test. Let's start with the fastest one, that millisecond malfunction. So this theory says psychosis isn't just losing touch with reality. It reframes it as a physical problem, a connectivity issue in the brain's network.
And what's so cool is that this model just neatly explains both sides of something like schizophrenia. So the positive symptoms, hallucinations, delusions, they're caused by disconnection. It's like different parts of the brain are shouting and not listening to each other. But the negative symptoms, like a lack of motivation or emotion, that's the opposite problem. It's overconnection. The brain gets stuck in these rigid, repetitive loops.
Okay, so if that's the problem, where do we aim our tools? Where's the target? Well, the theory points right to the prefrontal cortex. Think of it as the brain's master control tower, the hub that's supposed to keep all these networks in sync. It's the perfect place to go in and try a reset.
And this is where we bring our tools back into the picture. For that disconnection-causing psychosis, you could apply a kind of desynchronized stimulation. Basically, gentle electrical noise that forces the network to find its rhythm again. And for those rigid, over-connected negative symptoms, you do the exact opposite. You apply a synchronized pulse to jolt it out of that stuck pattern. All right, so that's the fast stuff. But what about the slower timescales? The ones that shape our mood and personality? How does the theory explain things like depression that take weeks, months, or even a whole lifetime to develop?
You know, for years, we've all heard the chemical imbalance story for depression. But what if that's just a symptom, not the real cause?
This model suggests something deeper, a failure of what's called adaptive plasticity. The brain literally loses its ability to grow and change. It can't adapt to the world around it anymore.
And here's a really compelling clue that this might be right. Think about it. Why do antidepressants take a solid 4 to 6 weeks to kick in? It's because that's exactly how long it takes for them to physically encourage the growth of new connections in the brain. They're not just tweaking chemicals, they're firing up the actual machinery of adaptive plasticity, which works on that exact timescale. It fits perfectly. Okay, let's go even deeper. What about our personality, the very essence of who we are? The theory sees it as the end product of our lifelong developmental plasticity. It's like this stable internal map of ourselves and everyone else literally wired into our brains by a lifetime of experiences.
So this also means you can't just fix a personality disorder with a single zap. It's a much deeper problem. The treatment has to be a two-step process. First, you'd use something like neuromodulation to make the adult brain more flexible and childlike again, to open it up to change. And then, second, while the brain's in that hyperplastic state, you give it new, corrective experiences, maybe through therapy or even something like virtual reality, to help it build a brand new, healthier map.
So, let's zoom out. What does all this mean for the future of psychiatry? I mean, if this theory is even close to right, it's a monumental shift. We're talking about moving away from just managing symptoms to actually fixing the brain's underlying physical problem. Just think about cardiology for a second. When the heart has a rhythm problem, what do? We use a pacemaker. It's a device that finds the electrical fault and corrects it, right at the source.
And that leads to the ultimate question, the real holy grail here. What if psychiatry had its own version of a pacemaker, but for the brain? This theory is basically the blueprint for it. A device that wouldn't just stimulate randomly, but would diagnose a specific timing error in the brain's network and deliver a precise, corrective signal to fix it.
You see how this creates a completely new protocol for mental health? The psychiatrist of the future isn't just going to be asking, how do you feel, and prescribing pills based on symptoms. They'll be using brain imaging to diagnose a specific network disturbance, they'll identify which plasticity timescale has gone wrong, and then they'll prescribe a targeted neuromodulation to fix that exact fault.
Really, it all boils down to this single, powerful idea. To get to that future, we first have to start thinking about mental disorders as what they actually are, brain disorders. Once we truly make that shift, developing interventions that treat the physical cause, well, that's the logical next step, just like in any other field of medicine.
And that leaves us with this really provocative final thought. We've always said the mind is what the brain does, but we've never really had the user manual. By starting to understand these rhythms, these timescales of plasticity, are we finally on the verge of learning how to conduct our own neural orchestra? Not just listening to the music of the mind, but finally figuring out how to tune it when it goes off key.